by Stephen King. A preface in 2 parts. Part 1, to be read before purchase. There are a couple of things you need to know about this version of The Stand right away, even before you leave the bookstore. For that reason, I hope I've caught you early, hopefully standing there by the case section of new fiction with your other purchases tucked under your arm and the book open in front of you. In other words, I hope I've caught you while your wallet is still safely in your pocket. Ready? Okay, thanks. I promise to be brief. First, this is not a new novel. If you hold misapprehensions on that score, let them be dispelled right here and right now, while you are still a safe distance from the cash register, which will take money out of your pocket and put it in mine. The Stand was originally published over 10 years ago. Second, this is not a brand new, entirely different version of The Stand. You will not discover old characters behaving in new ways, nor will the course of the tale branch off at some point from the old narrative, taking you, constant reader, in an entirely different direction. This version of The Stand is an expansion of the original novel. As I've said, you won't find old characters behaving in strange new ways, but you will discover that almost all of the characters were, in the book's original form, doing more things. And if I didn't think some of those things were interesting, perhaps even enlightening, I would never have agreed to this project. If this is not what you want, then don't buy this book. If you have bought it already, then I hope you saved your sales receipt. The bookshop where you made your purchase will want it before granting you credit or a cash refund. If this expansion is something you want, I invite you to come along with me just a little farther. I have lots to tell you, and I think we can talk better around the corner, in the dark. Part 2, to be read after purchase. This isn't so much a preface, actually, as it is an explanation of why this new version of The Stand exists at all. It was a long novel to begin with, and this expanded version will be regarded by some, perhaps many, as an act of indulgence by an author whose works have been successful enough to allow it. I hope not, but it had to be pretty stupid not to realize that such criticism is in the offing. After all, many critics of the novel regarded it bloated and overlong to begin with. Whether the book was too long to begin with, or has become so in this edition, is a matter I leave to the individual reader. I only wanted to take this little space to say that I am republishing The Stand as it was originally written, not to serve myself or any individual reader, but to serve a body of readers who have asked to have it. I would not offer it if I myself didn't think those portions which were dropped from the original manuscript made the story a richer one, and I'd be a liar if I didn't admit I am curious as to what its reception will be. I'll spare you the story of how The Stand came to be written. The chain of thought which produces a novel rarely interests anyone but aspiring novelists. They tend to believe there is a secret formula to writing a commercially successful novel, but there isn't. You get an idea, at some point another idea kicks in, you make a connection or a series of in-between ideas, a few characters, usually more than shadows at first suggest themselves. A possible ending occurs to the writer's mind. Although when the ending comes, it's very much like the one the writer envisioned, and at some point, the novelist sits down with a paper and pen, a typewriter, or a word cruncher. When asked, "How do you write?" I invariably answer one word at a time, and the answer is invariably dismissed. But that is all it is. It sounds too simple to be true, but consider the Great Wall of China, if you will. One stone at a time, man. One stone at a... That's all. One stone at a time. But I've read you can see that motherfucker from space without a telescope. For readers who are interested, the story is told in the final chapter of Dawn's Macabre, a rambling but user-friendly overview of the horror genre I published in 1981. This isn't a commercial for that book. I'm just saying the tale is there if you want, although it's told not because it is interesting in itself, but to illustrate an entirely different point. For the purposes of this book, what's important is that approximately 400 pages of manuscript were deleted from the final draft. The reason wasn't an editorial one. If that had been the case, I would be content to let the book live its life and die its eventual death as it was originally published. Excuse me. The cuts remain at the behest of the accounting department. They turned out production costs, leaving these next to the hardcover sales on my previous 4 books, and decided that a cover price of $12.95 was about what the market would bear. Compare the price to this one, friends and neighbors. I was asked if I would like to make the cuts, or if I would prefer someone in the editorial department to do it. I reluctantly agreed to do the surgery myself. I think I did a fairly good job for a writer who's been accused over and over again of having diarrhea of the word processor. There is only one place trash can man's trip across the country from Indiana to Nevada that seems noticeably scarred in the original version. If all of the stories there, one might ask, then why bother? Isn't it indulgence after all? It better not be. If it is, then I have spent a large portion of my life wasting my time. As it happens, I think that in really good stories, the whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. If that were not so, the following would be a perfectly acceptable version of Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel were two children with a nice father and a nice mother. The nice mother died and the father married a bitch. The bitch wanted the kids out of the way so she would have more money to spend on herself. She bullied her spineless, soft-headed husband into taking Hansel and Gretel into the woods and killing them. The kids' father relented at the last moment, allowing them to live so they could starve to death in the woods instead of dying quickly and mercifully at the blade of his knife. While they were wandering around, they found a house made out of candy. It was owned by a witch who was into cannibalism. She locked them up and told them that when they were good and fat, she was going to eat them. But the kids got the best of her. Hansel shoved her into her own oven. They found the witch's treasure, and they must have found him out too, because eventually they arrived home again. When they got there, Dad gave the bitch the boot, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Well, I don't know what you think, but for me, that version's a loser. The story is there, but it's not elegant. It's like a Cadillac with the chrome stripped off and the paint sanded down a dome. It goes somewhere, but, boss. I have him restore all 400 of the missing pages. There is a difference between doing it upright and just being downright vulgar. Some of what was left on the cutting room floor when I turned in the truncated version deserved to be left there, and there it remains. Other things, such as Franny's confrontation with her mother Carla earlier in the book, seem to add that richness and dimension which I as a reader enjoy deeply. Returning to Hansel and Gretel for just a moment, you may remember that the wicked stepmother demands that her husband bring her the hearts of the children as proof that the hapless woodcutter has done as she said. The woodcutter demonstrates one good siege of intelligence by bringing her the hearts of two rabbits. Or take the famous trail of breadcrumbs Hansel leaves behind so he and his sister could find their way back. Thinking dude. But when he attempts to follow the back trail, he finds the birds ate it. Neither of these bits are strictly essential to the plot, but in another way, they make the plot. They are great and magical bits of storytelling. They change what could have been a dull piece of work into a tale which has charmed and terrified readers for over a century. I suspect nothing added here is as good as Hansel's trail of breadcrumbs, but I have always regretted the fact that no one but me and a few in-house readers at Doubleday ever met that maniac who simply calls himself the Kid, or witnessed what happens to him outside a tunnel which counterprints another tunnel half a continent away, the Lincoln Tunnel in the state of New York, which two of the characters negotiate earlier in the story. So, here is The Stand, constant reader, as its author originally intended for it to roll out of the showroom. All its crumb is now intact, for better or for worse. And the final reason for presenting this version is the simplest. Although it has never been my favorite novel, it is the one people who like my books seem to like the most. When I speak, which is as rarely as possible, people always speak to me about The Stand. They discuss the characters as though they were living people and ask frequently, "What happened to so-and-so?" As if I got letters from them every now and again. I'm inevitably asked if it is ever going to be a movie. The answer, by the way, is probably yes. Will it be a good one? I don't know. Bad or good, movies nearly always have a strange diminishing effect on works of fantasy. Of course, there are exceptions. The Wizard of Oz is an example which springs immediately to mind. In discussions, people are willing to cast various parts endlessly. I've always thought Robert Duvall would make a splendid Randall Flagg, but I've heard such people suggest such as Clint Eastwood, Bruce Stern, and Christopher Walken. They all sound good, just as Bruce Springsteen would seem to make an interesting Larry Underwood, if he ever chose to try acting. And based on his videos, I think he would do very well. Although my personal choice would be Marshall Crenshaw. But in the end, I think it's perhaps best for Stu, Larry Glenn, Franny, Ralph, Tom, Lloyd, and Randall Flagg to belong to the reader, who will visualize them through the lens of imagination in a vivid and constantly changing way. After all, while only an illusion of motion comprised of thousands of still photographs. The imagination, however, moves with its own tidal flow. Films, even the best of them, freeze fiction. Anyone who ever saw One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and then reads Ken Kesey's novel will find it harder than possible not to see Jack Nicholson's face on Randall Patrick McMurphy. That ain't necessarily bad, but it is limiting. The glory of a good tale is that it is limitless and fluid. A good tale belongs to each reader in its own particular way. Finally, I write for only two reasons: to please myself and to please others. In returning to this long tale of dark Christianity, I hope I've done both. October 24th, 1989. Outside, the street's on fire and a real death waltz between what's flesh and fantasy, and the poets down here don't write nothing at all. They just stand back and let it all be. And in the quick of the night, they reach for their moment and try to make an honest stand. But they wind up wounded, not even dead, tonight in Jungle Land. Bruce Springsteen. And it was clear she couldn't go on. The door was opened and the wind appeared. The candles blew and then disappeared. The curtains flew and then he appeared. Said, "Don't be afraid. Come on, Mary." And she had no fear. And she ran to him, and they started to fly. She had taken his hand. "Come on, Mary. Don't fear the Reaper." Blue Oyster called. "What's that spell? What's that spell? What's that spell?" Country Joe and the Fish.